So what I would tell you if you were standing in front of the farm right now is that what you're looking at is a 6,000 square foot green roof. The farm, first and foremost, is a green roof. The company wanted a green roof on their building, and then it was through a proposal that it became a vegetable farm. Right now, like I mentioned, it supplies 6 restaurants or so, a CSA, and a market. People often ask how many varieties of produce I grow. Last year it was around 30 different types of fruits and vegetables. Within each type, it was like, or variety, it was about 6 or 7 different types. So we're growing like Yaya carrots, Scarlet Nantes carrots, Atomic Reds, Belgian icicles, etc.
Where do you source the seeds?
I buy seeds from the same people I've always bought for, Rooftop or not. Johnny's Hudson Valley Seed Library, which is a local group of guys who used to be librarians and now save seeds right here in the Hudson Valley. Seeds of Change, Seed Savers Exchange, both of them are like heirloom seed collectors. And another one that I really like is, besides Johnny's, Territorial is another good one. Are you guys gardeners and green thumbs at all? I know Annie is.
I am.
Not me.
Cool. Cool. Today we're gonna transplant herbs. You guys are gonna go home with an herb that you've transplanted. The seeds for those came from Territorial Seed Company. All of the seeds that I sourced, it's not always important to me that I buy organic seeds, simply because we can talk a little bit more about the word organic in terms of not food product. But so Johnny's, for example, is a not all organic seed company. But what's more important to me is the diversity, the genetic diversity of what I plant. So I like to buy unusual fruits and vegetables. I like the idea that you're growing like black crim tomatoes, because I think ultimately what I'm trying to do is build an ecosystem that attracts lots of different kinds of insects, that supports the fact that like we're losing the genetic diversity in our food, and then I can raise the plants organically whether or not the seeds were, and I do. This is a fully organic farm. It's in fact like well past organic. Like a lot of people use dish soap to deter pests. I use like Dr. Bronner's dish soap. You know, I mean, we're being really careful around here, and a lot of that is because I care very deeply about the way I treat the soil. I'm aware of the fact that as a green roof, everything I use percolates very directly to the city below. So if the green roof's intention is to help with stormwater runoff, like to hold rain back so that septic waste isn't going into the river, it wouldn't make any sense for me to be a non-organic farm, because then I would be holding rainwater, treating it badly, and then sending it out into the world, and that's like just as bad. You know, I was also trained as a permaculturalist, so.
So speaking of water, what is your water source up here?
Rain, and then when I seed or transplant, I use New York City tap, which is the finest in the world. And it's because I do have a rainwater collection system, but just for the purposes of seeding and transplant, which is really like the first 5 days of any plant's life, I do use hose. It's a lot easier and targeted. And I can show you my watering technique. I think one of the first ways that plants get killed around New York City is people don't know how to water properly. So if you're interested, we'll do a little demo. Yeah. The other thing that I would tell you if we were looking at this is that it's 4 to 7 inches of soil, which for you growers, you would know it's very shallow. Vegetables want 18 inches. So I'm really cutting them off. And what's interesting about that, and you'll notice this, is that the plants are very healthy looking, but they're stunted. Maybe this is why I like working with children. It's like everything is small. But what I did this year to experiment over the course of last year and this year was I've been testing different ways of adding compost to the soil. I use a food-based compost. I have a cow manure compost. I have worm manure compost, and I have leaf litter compost, and all of those are being applied to different rows. And then one is just left as green roof soil. Because something that's really amazing about growing food in the city is you get to get very inventive about how you fertilize. In larger spaces of land where you have very deep soil systems, you could do no-till and apply compost every year. In a space like a paved parking lot with raised beds or a green roof, you're limited by weight, you're limited by resources. So we're learning this whole new style of making sure that food is healthy for you. Because without composting and without fertilizing your food, it's not taking in nutrients. You're growing a plant that isn't as healthy for you.
So are you then composting specific rows with a specific compost to see what the effect is?
Exactly. And I'm trying as much as possible to do like a row of kale with no fertilizer, a row of kale with cow manure. Or the very worst case scenario, like a row of broccoli and a row of kale, so that it's comparable, like with like.
Is it too early to notice any differences?
No, and I will point them out. They're very, very obvious, yeah. And in fact, last year a lot of the pest problems that I had were not necessarily because there were pests On the farm, it was because the plants were nutrient deprived by the end of the year, so they were very susceptible. Just like if you're working a 9 to 5 every day, you're in an office building and you're not eating well, you're going to get a cold a lot faster. I noticed that my plants had by November, I had a lot more issues than they had in the spring. So it's really fascinating. The flavor changes as well. Plants become bitter when they're less healthy. Because the photosynthetic sugar that they're maintaining in their leaves, the plant is stressed, so it starts, if the job of a plant is to produce seeds, that's all it wants, always, vegetables or not, it starts to use up a lot of those sugars into seed production, which changes the flavor of the plant. Like salad greens that don't taste as good or they taste bitter, it's because the plant is just like, come on, I just want a seed, and like all you want is the leaves. So you need to keep the plant nice and mellow. So, yeah.
You were saying you don't necessarily need your seeds to be organic, but
Right.
are any of them genetically modified? Is something
No, and thank you for making that
Yeah.
distinction.
Yeah.
GM seeds, my fear with them is that we haven't yet seen, we watched this happen with birth control actually, how women took a lot of birth control in the 50s or like a really heavy dosage of it, and then now we're sort of discovering the science of how that was like too many hormones, and we need to, I think with GM seeds there's a utility to them and they're probably going to figure it out. I wish people would stop selling them and putting them into the world irresponsibly before we figure out exactly what their benefits are. So for example, if I took a GM corn and I planted it, it's going to, I'm sure you guys have maybe read about the whole controversy with wind pollination, is that when you grow a GM corn seed, corn is a wind pollinated plant, so there's no way to control the genetically modified seed from translating its pollen to another plant, and then I guess infection is a sort of a strong word, but affecting other corn in the area. You can grow something like a GM cassava, and like you can grow it and then split it and then put more cassava over here, and it will stay contained. You know, so what they're doing right now with GM seeds in some parts of East Africa is they're putting an enhanced, cassava is a big staple crop, so they're putting a lot of like vitamins A and E and D. They're sort of jacking up that content in the cassava that's being genetically modified, and then that's what they're giving to people to grow because it's a way of like inserting nutrients.
But you don't use any GM.
I personally don't know because I don't need to.
Okay, all right.
A lot of genetically modified stuff is to increase yield and production, but it's for crops that I'm not growing. You know, so when I say I'm using maybe non-organic seeds, what I'm talking about is like some of my pea seeds, for example. Pea seeds are very susceptible to fungal rot. If I plant a pea and then it rains for 10 days, if there are fungus in the soil, it's going to rot the seed. I'm going to lose my seeds. So sometimes you get like a fungicidal coating that just kills fungal problems, basically. And then as soon as the pea germinates, it washes away into the soil. There's levels of that. There's some people that get out there and they just spray fungicidal coating all over the soil. I never do that. I just get the seed from Johnny's that has like a moderate amount. It dissipates. It protects the seed grows. No big deal. Yeah, sure. I sometimes give really long answers to very simple questions. You just have to be like, I get it. You know, because I think everything's interesting. So definitely call me out on that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
There are often not simple answers too.
Well, true, and I think that's really important. I mean, particularly with something like food. There's really no way to say like this is what organic means. I mean, everything has a place and a reason. I wouldn't fungicidally coat sunflower seeds. The shell is too hard. You don't need to. But I would definitely fungicidally coat peas and beans. You know. Other things about the roof, real quick. We do have these apiaries, 3 beehives. The beehives produced last year about 65 pounds per hive, which is awesome. It's a lot of honey. A lot of people ask like where are they getting their nectar from? New York City, there are trees everywhere. So a lot of the honey it's linden honey, it comes from linden trees. The bees will go up to 5 miles to pollinate. So they're going into Prospect Park. They don't really cross the river, but they'll go into Prospect Park and Royal Park. There also actually isn't a lot of green space. They hit the UN and there's nothing there. So they go south a lot. They go into Queens, I'm sure, but mostly south. And I could tell you in the spring the honey is like light and fine. It has sort of like a fluty flavor, like flute note. It's very like, it's like sip of honey. And then in the fall it's like a dense, rich sort of like velvet on your tongue flavor. And that's because the pollen they're collecting changes and the nectar that they're drinking is different. It's really cool. And I'm not growing nearly enough fruits and vegetables for the bees to source off of. If that was all they were drinking, I have about 80,000 bees. It wouldn't be enough for them. Actually, sorry, I have 50,000 bees now. They go quite far. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about urban beekeeping, people always ask, like, are they there for pollination? Well, a lot of what I'm growing doesn't need to be pollinated. Like lettuce doesn't need to be pollinated. So I'm more interested in what they're doing in the neighborhood, actually.